So I'm Elliot Hasler. I'm a writer and director. My most recent film, Vindication Swim, is a feature about the first British woman to swim the English Channel. It kind of all began for me when I was about 10. There was a school project at the school I was at where they didn't do any lessons for a week, and instead of that they made this adaptation of Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And that was kind of my first experience being behind a camera. I'd always loved films growing up, watching them and things, and then that kind of gave me a little bit of a taste of what it's like to actually make a film. So kind of everyone had little parts to play, like did a bit of the editing, bit of the, the writing, the direction, bit of the acting, all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of gave you an overview on a very amateur level of how a film kind of is made. So from then on, I started making my own little films. The scale kind of got better, the quality grew and everything. Then when I was 14, I decided to make a feature about my great-grandfather's experiences in the Second World War. So he was a prisoner of war in Italy, then he escaped and he made this incredible journey across the war-torn sort of landscape of Italy, evading the Nazis and that kind of thing, to get rescued by the Allies. So I dramatized that as a film. It was an amateur production, it was just sort of friends and family. We didn't have any real professional actors or anything in it, and it's a sort of a labor of love for 3 years. And then it went on to get a UK and a US release, which was totally unexpected. I mean, it was an amateur project, and then to do so well was a big shock, but a very welcome one. And then off the back of that, I was able to kind of launch my career with Vindication Swim and the projects I've got lined up at the moment. It's a little late to the game, but I'm currently watching Succession, which is a fantastic show, especially on like a screenwriting level. The writing's phenomenal in that show. So yeah, I'm watching that. A bit of catch up. I should have watched it sooner, but I said the writing is phenomenal. So I think any screenwriter should really go out and watch that. I mean, it's fantastic how witty and sharp the dialogue is. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia is kind of my big inspiration. I watched that when I was a little bit older, but yeah, that one's been a huge inspiration for me. One of David Lean's film catalogue has been a big inspiration. As a kid growing up, I was a big fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, hence the kind of water theme with Vindication Swim. That's probably how that came about. So yeah, I adored those films as a kid, still do. Yeah, I watch them from time to time. Quite a young age, I wanted to make films, and I didn't know any screenwriters or anything like that, so I kind of figured the best way to do it was to just kind of write my own stuff. Yeah, that's how that came about. I'd never really studied film or filmmaking or anything like that. I'm all self-taught, and same with the screenwriting. So I just sort of began writing, and I think through trial and error you kind of learn how to put a screenplay together, and then obviously the formatting and stuff, you can figure that out. Yeah, I'm a big believer in the 3-act structure. I think that was something I didn't know about when I first started writing, and then I think you kind of figure it out without knowing what it is, and then you kind of read into it and about kind of what it all entails with the different acts and where the climaxes are and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that definitely informs my screenwriting. I think that's a very important thing to know, because then if you want to break it, you kind of have that freedom. But I think it's a very good foundation to begin with. I'm not too sure really. I think as a writer it's good to have a voice that's kind of fluid and malleable, so it can change depending on the requirements of the story you're trying to tell. There's a story I'm working on at the moment that's set in South Africa, so I think my voice on that screenplay is going to have to be very different from the sort of work on Vindication Swim, which is a very English set piece. It's in the 1920s and stuff. So I think my voice has to change depending on the demands of the story and of the characters. I think I really kind of have to understand people and understand story on a sort of deep level in order to be able to switch my voice to the requirements. I think, yeah, definitely I do take a lot of inspiration from true stories, from sort of historical figures and stuff like that. I think for me it's always about kind of the ordinary people and their sort of extraordinary circumstances they find themselves in, or the extraordinary things that they take on, like Mercedes Gleitze swimming the Channel, or my great-grandfather traveling across war-torn Italy. I think those are kind of always the things that interest me, is these sort of ordinary lives that then become extraordinary. Well, I never actually met him. He died a year before I was born, so it was sort of it was like this kind of oral history within the family that was sort of passed down by different members and things like that. So it always kind of fascinated me growing up, hearing these different stories from different members of the family and stuff. And then I sort of began to piece them together, and it kind of worked out a sort of backbone of what his experience actually was. And then sort of online research, archives and that kind of thing, I sort of pieced it together. And then it was just a fantastic story. Really. I wish I could have spoke to him and sort of heard it verbatim, but I think in that generation there was a real reluctance to tell the full story and to really speak about their experiences. So it was definitely an interesting journey to kind of piece it all together and figure out exactly what happened to him. Yeah, I mean, I think with sort of any true story, as you say, there's not kind of a record of what was said between characters in discussions and things like that. So I think there's always a bit of creative license in that sense. But I feel like if you really immerse yourself into the story and into the characters specifically, then I think you can kind of step into their shoes and really kind of figure out the sorts of things that they would have said. So there is definitely a sort of an aspect of realism even in the discussions that are fictionalized within the film, because it's, like I said, it's kind of that immersion in that person. So I feel like you begin to think like them and then hopefully speak like them as well when you're sort of typing up the words that the characters are saying. I don't really like doing sort of big character breakdowns and stuff like that. I prefer to just kind of sort of sit back and think about them. I sort of always focus more on plot at the start when I'm doing a film, and then figure out what the necessary characters are, and then sort of try and step into their shoes after the storyline's kind of figured out. And then I think, inevitably it changes because you figure out what their motivations are and that kind of thing. So yeah, I feel it's quite a long process for me to kind of get into the mindset of the characters, but I think when you're actually in there, then that's, it's kind of that magical moment where everything kind of falls into place. I stumbled across it in an article. I'd never heard of Mercedes Gleitze. I knew nothing about her, which is pretty shocking really, because we share the same hometown of Brighton on the south coast of England. So I should have known who she was, but unfortunately I didn't. And then I just stumbled across this article and was sort of instantly captivated by this woman and this incredible story that she had, sort of overcoming the odds of society and of nature itself really, and conquering the English Channel. Just something about her story spoke to me on a very deep level. As I said, we're from the same hometown, and we learnt to swim pretty much on the same beach. We're born exactly a century apart as well. She was born in 1900, I was born in 2000. So there was a real kind of synergy that made me feel very connected to her right from the outset. I think that's part of what really drew me to the story, was that kind of connection that I felt right from the offset. The family were very supportive. They weren't really too involved in the making of the film, but since it came out in the UK, they came to screenings. Mercedes' granddaughter came to a screening we did up in Norwich, which was lovely. I mean, I hadn't met her before, and then it was like Mercedes Gleitze had walked through the door. There's a real sort of striking similarity, which was pretty incredible to see. As I said, there's a lot of synergies that kind of connect Mercedes Gleitze to myself, in that we're both from Brighton. We were born exactly a century apart. I really did sort of empathise with her story as well. She was such a determined, sort of fearless, relentless person, and I feel those qualities are very translatable into the film industry. You need that kind of determination to succeed and things like that. So yeah, there was a lot that drew me to her. And I love the sea. I always grew up near the sea, so that was, having the sea as kind of a character within the script almost, was something that definitely drew me towards the film as well. I mean, with Vindication Swim, it sort of began as a very small production really. We had a very small team. It wasn't kind of the big thing that it grew into. So yeah, it was, we just sort of, got a group of people together who were very passionate about the project, and were determined to kind of bring it to life and make it happen. Cobbled together financing. It was a small budget movie. So the raising funds is always a challenge, but on this one, because the budget was pretty small, it was obviously easier than if you're doing sort of a multi-million-dollar or multi-million-pound budget. So yeah, we managed to cobble the financing together, and then it was a case of shooting the film. The shooting was particularly difficult because we're filming out at sea. You're up against all the whims of Mother Nature, basically. So yeah, that was very challenging. The first day we went out there, the weather was probably slightly too bad to actually film. The swell was pretty bad, the sea was a little bit too rough, the wind was quite strong. So yeah, we went out there, we tried to do a few of these scenes. John Locke, who plays Mercedes' coach in the film, he'd be vomiting over one side of the boat and then delivering his lines on the other side of the boat, while Kirsten Callahan, who plays Mercedes, and myself were in the water shooting the scene, and we'd have to sort of swim back to avoid the kind of unpleasant things that were entering the water that day. But yeah, that was very challenging, and none of that stuff ended up in the actual finished film. So yeah, there was a lot of challenges with the actual production of that film. It was pretty unique in that sense, because it was, an indie film on such a big scale. Most of them are kind of a few actors in a room, or sort of one confined location, but we had multiple locations, multiple days out at sea. So it was a really big undertaking, especially for an indie film. A lot of blood, a lot of tears, a lot of sweat went into the making of that. And then the hard part really though was after that was all finished. So we made the film, we edited it, everyone was very happy with the final result, and then trying to get the film released was a huge challenge. There came a point where we didn't think we were ever going to get it released. We kind of waiting around for the best part of a year really, trying to pick up deals, and just no one was biting, because it's a drama, it's not kind of a commercial project in a sense, according to sort of what the distributors view as commercial. So yeah, it was a long time sitting around, and then we found Picnic Entertainment, who took the film on and gave us a fantastic release here in the UK. It was theatrical release. We were promised 2 weeks. We ended up having 18. So it was an incredible sort of success story with this film, one that we really didn't anticipate happening. We didn't think it was going to go as big as it did, but yeah, it was incredible. And then we've got a great release coming up in the US as well, sort of theatrical, New York and LA, and then digital after that. So yeah, the momentum has been incredible, and like I said, from this kind of grassroots origin of the film, it really had this sort of snowball effect where it developed this momentum over the sort of 4 years that we worked on the project, really. And I think Mercedes' story really is what helped with that. It's such an incredible story, and I think people were so inspired by her and what she did that they kind of came on board and offered not necessarily money, but their time and their expertise and their services to this project to help bring it to life. I think that, you know, you always have to have an entrepreneurial spirit as an independent filmmaker. It's pretty necessary. That's definitely a challenge, doing a period piece on a budget. But I think what was interesting about that was it kind of set us apart from a lot of the other indie films that were coming out at that time, because as you say, very few of them attempt to do anything, you know, that is a period piece. So this one's set in 1927, so we had to have, you know, period appropriate wardrobe, vehicles, sets, all that kind of thing. It was certainly challenging to pull off. I mean, but we did manage to do it. You know, all the costumes in the film, they're original pieces from the 1920s and 30s. Like the swimming costume is a woolen swim costume that we managed to source. That Kirsten wore in the sea throughout the entire production. We had to like keep restitching it because it would kind of come apart where it was so old. But it really gave that kind of authenticity that I feel the production needed. Things like cars as well. We went around local car clubs, people who own these classic cars from the 20s, and we said to them, you know, we're making this film, we don't really have much of a budget, but you know, we can pay your petrol if you want to bring your car along. And I'd say 9 times out of 10 they said don't even bother paying for the gas. You know, we'll turn up because we want to have our car featured in a movie. We had to take safety very seriously, of course, when we're filming out there. You know, we're sort of 2 miles out into the English Channel. We're pretty isolated out there, so we had kind of one big sort of support boat that we did a lot of the shooting off of. We had lifeguards on that one and everything. Then we had a sort of inflatable sort of rib with an outboard motor that would kind of zip around, do the fast-paced shots and that kind of thing. It also sort of doubled up as a safety boat as well, so we had more lifeguards on that one. Then we had the period rowing boat that we've managed to find from the 1920s that the actors were loaded into, which would kind of be towed behind on the bigger boat. So yeah, it was a big undertaking. We had kind of multiple vessels out there every time we went out to film, you know, for safety and so that we could get the shots we needed. I mean, in terms of days of shooting, I've lost count, but the script was finished in sort of about June 2019. It took about a year to do the screenplay, 6 months of research and then 6 months of writing. And then yeah, after that it was 3 months of production, because we were relegated kind of the summer months that we could actually film in the English Channel. Otherwise it's far too cold to, you know, be putting actors into the water and things like that. So yeah, 3 years of production, 3 consecutive summers out on the water. We had COVID right in the middle of that too, so there was just problem after problem really with this film, and it was a mammoth undertaking. You know, it was a long period that we were working on it, and then, like I said, kind of a year of sitting on it afterwards trying to get a distribution deal. And then another year after that of releasing it and getting it out to the world. So it's been a long project. We dedicated a lot of time to it. We were initially anticipating shooting all of the sea scenes over the course of a summer, but we kind of approached the end of the summer and realized that wasn't going to happen. So then it was going to be another year, then COVID hit, and then it had to be a third year. So I think COVID kind of delayed us by about a year. But yeah, no, I think there was quite a funny story. One of the actors was saying he apparently the original call was, we said, oh, we'll go out maybe 3 or 4 times on the water to get those scenes. I think it ended up being 30+ times that we were out there. Yeah, it was hard at some points to persuade people, you know, to keep going with the project. But I think it ties back to that inspiration in Mercedes' story. I think everyone on board the film was so passionate about telling that story that they were really, you know, they were on board basically. Some of the actors, they went off and did other projects in between, like John Locke, who plays the coach, he went off and did Poor Things while we were shooting Vindication Swim, then came back and did more scenes for us. But COVID was quite helpful in that regard because everyone was sitting around doing nothing, so you know, the availability was pretty good at that point. Yeah, getting the cast together was an interesting journey because it was such a long production. So we kind of had the principals on at the start. Kirsten Callahan as Mercedes, she was sort of the first actor we attached, and then John Locke as the coach. I'd worked with John before. You know, he's been in like Darkest Hour, Poor Things, The Favourite, so he's done these great Oscar-winning movies, so it was great to have him on board. So yeah, those two were kind of there from the start, and then other people sort of came on to the production as it went on. Like James Wilby, who was in Howard's End and Gosford Park and stuff like that, he came on board the project sort of after we'd finished the shooting, really. We went back and did a scene with him after the main body of filming was done. Same with Douglas Hodge, he came on board after the film was finished in sort of the post-production stage to do his parts of the film. So it was really kind of Yeah, sort of a long journey really, and actors kind of came on board, they did their scenes, they went and kind of came back over the course of this 3-year production. I mean, in terms of the festivals, it's a strange one really, because I mean, everyone submits their films to sort of the big ones, and they're just so oversaturated. So I think these days it's almost impossible to get your film into those without some sort of larger backing behind you. You know, this film had no support from the sort of British film industry establishment or anything like that. It was a truly independent production. I mean, it was just a group of people really passionate about the story who managed to cobble together enough money to make it and then go out there and make this story. So yeah, we were really up against it kind of with sort of the established industry. We were the underdogs, we were really on our own, and I think we managed to generate this kind of momentum behind the project, which is a pretty unique thing for an indie film really, and that definitely helped us with festivals and helped us with distribution further down the line. At the start of kind of my filmmaking career, I didn't really have any mentors. I entered this industry with no connections in it whatsoever. It was kind of just, I knew it was something I wanted to do, and I sort of went out and did it at first, and then the momentum kind of grew on from there, and over the years I've sort of found contacts and mentors and stuff like that, and they've been very helpful in sort of progressing the career forward. So it's been an interesting journey, because I feel like it has sort of started from nothing and then worked its way up, which has been a sort of fascinating journey to go on. Nicola Piercy has been a fantastic source of advice and help and support throughout the release of Vindication Swim and prior to that as well. So she came on board at the end of that production. I mean, she's been a fantastic mentor. She used to be the president of Lionsgate, the UK and Europe section, now owns her own company, which Vindication Swim was actually the first film that they released as a distribution company. So yeah, it was great to get on board with her and sort of become part of her sort of distribution company as well. It was a connection of a connection or something like that, as it usually is in the film industry. I mean, it's such a it's so based on who you know and those connections and things. So yeah, I mean, my advice in that regard would be to go to as many networking events as possible, speak to as many people as possible, because you just never know what connection is going to lead where and who might be able to help you out. And I was pretty terrible at it at the start. I'm not naturally much of a people person, and I think you kind of have to kind of develop that skill and learn it. I think it's pretty crucial for this industry. Just throw yourself in the deep end, force yourself to do it, I think is the best way. If you overthink it too much, then it becomes more of a challenge. But yeah, if you go to a networking event and throw yourself in and just speak to as many people as possible, over time you'll get better at it. My family have been very, very supportive of the whole thing. I mean, it's a pretty unorthodox industry to want to enter. So yeah, I think there was some sort of trepidation at the start about, is this the right choice? Do you really want to dedicate so many years of your life to doing something that there's no guarantee of payback at the end of it? But no, they've been incredibly supportive. I mean, my dad was a massive help, in particular on Vindication Swim and the previous films and stuff as well. So it's been wonderful to kind of work with them on the films. He was very active in organising the shoots of Vindication Swim and getting people on board and things like that. So yeah, it's been a great journey to go on with them as well. I mean, I think the big advice is don't be afraid to kind of think big about it. As I said earlier, Vindication Swim was a big production for an indie film. It was something that a lot of people told us we wouldn't be able to pull off. But I think a lot of indie films sort of play it a little bit too safe, and then it just becomes sort of white noise like every other indie film. It's hard to kind of break above the mold. There's so many now because filmmaking's become so accessible. Anyone with an iPhone can technically go out and make a film. So I think, don't be afraid to think big about it. And I would also say don't be afraid to be scared about it either, because it's a tough job. I think a lot of it is kind of overcoming your fears, and the only way to do that is to really throw yourself into it. It's definitely important to assemble a great crew and a great cast as well. I think if you're going to dedicate yourself to a film production, however long that is, if you're just shooting for a month, or if you're shooting, in the case of Vindication Swim, for 3 years, you really want to have great people around you that you can trust, that are going to do a good job, and that it's fun to work with at the end of the day. It's no fun when you appear on set and you despise everybody around you. You want to have a good time. It's a fun career, so don't get too serious about it. You want it to stay fun, I think. Believe in your vision. You've written the script, so I think I think, at least for me, when I write, it's always very visual. I can kind of piece the story together in my mind's eye, and then obviously you have to try and put that down into words on paper. So I think any sort of screenwriter has a great vision of what the film should look like, what they want it to look like. So I think that's sort of 50% of the journey right there. So the next step is kind of making that vision come alive and speaking to people in the right way. That's a really good question. I mean, there was a lot of lessons from Vindication Swim, really.
Go into all of them. How from you want to?
I think with Vindication Swim, especially at the screenplay stage, I think put as much energy and time into the screenplay as possible. I think there was some sort of holes in that screenplay that should have been fixed at the beginning, which sort of led to problems further down the line. So, for the next script that I've written, we spent a long time going over that with consultants and advisors and things like that. Again, as many people to read the script as possible, which wasn't something that I really did with Vindication Swim, which in hindsight I think would have been beneficial because, as I say, there were problems that cropped up, especially in the first act further down the line, which could have been solved in the script phase and made it cheaper and easier on set. So yeah, I think that would be my advice is get as much feedback as possible on your screenplay, find the holes, get feedback from different people as well, because if someone mentions an issue in the first act that is also mentioned by the other people who give you feedback, then it's something that should be addressed. And it's a lot cheaper to address it when it's just on your laptop than when you're on set with a load of actors and crew and everyone's getting paid by the hour and waiting. Yeah, we were just very lucky with that in that one of the producers on Vindication Swim, Sally Wood, when we were in the edit, she brought on a script consultant really, but she also consults on edits, and she gave fantastic feedback on the edit and kind of helped us refine it and get the themes especially and really kind of the characters' motivations and all of that, make that come across as strongly as it could on screen. So yeah, on the next one, went straight back to her and said, we've got this script. Can you help us with it? Which she did, and her feedback was really, it was invaluable. I think it's always great to get someone who doesn't really know about the story, doesn't really know about the characters, and then to put it, before them, and then they can give you their honest, unbiased opinion of it, which is incredibly helpful as a writer. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Vindication Swim I wrote on my own, and then this one I've co-written with Kirsten Callahan, who played Mercedes in Vindication Swim. She's also a writer. So I think switching into a sort of a co-writing environment was obviously a big change from Vindication Swim, but I think I do really enjoy that way of writing, having someone to bounce ideas off of and that kind of thing. I think it saves a lot of time. I think it's incredibly helpful because, they can say, oh, that idea is terrible, or I can say, that idea is terrible, and then, then you can kind of work upon finding a good solution for it, which for a script is very important. You don't want to get too tied up in your own head, I think, with it. So having someone you can, who can kind of undo it, and then you can find the right path to take is very, very helpful. I think the main thing is to come away inspired. Mercedes Gleitze was a remarkable woman. What she did was incredibly inspiring, not just for women, but for everybody, really. It shows that no matter who you are, you can go out there and you can achieve these extraordinary things. She was a working class typist from London who decided she wanted to swim the English Channel and nothing was going to stop her. The establishment, the sort of misogyny at the time, the racism she felt as a child of German immigrants in that interwar period, none of that, she didn't allow any of that to define her. What she was going to be defined by was her English Channel swim, her sort of Britishness, if you like, and sort of along the way she discovers her own identity. So I think that's sort of the main message, the main takeaway from the film is to be inspired, to go out there and do something extraordinary.